YouTube. Once again, it's Kennard Vernon Stewart. Before we get into the podcast, I want you to take a minute to subscribe to the channel. Once you hear the information, go ahead and click the like button, unlike button, or, of course, comment on this particular video. We're talking about Auburn football. We're talking about Gus Malzahn actually being fired as the coach, and who will be retained when we talk about assistants at Auburn. That's going to be an important piece because usually when a new coach comes in, they kind of like their own guys, but Auburn's got some pretty good ones on the plains. Like the video, comment, and subscribe. And as always, it's great to be an Auburn Tiger, War Eagle. You got some big names down at Auburn. You talk about Kevin Steele, defensive coordinator who has led Auburn to some sustainable level of, pretty good defenses. I mean, he has the bend but not break thing going on. He had a detractor in 2018. I thought that was probably one of his worst tenures outside of this year, the pandemic year, where during that stretch between Mississippi State and Alabama, he allowed about 400 and something yards per game and an unprecedented amount of points, and allowed teams to stay on the field about 20 to 25 first downs per game. But Kevin Steele has been a mainstay. I think his staple has been what he was able to do against LSU in 2019 with the 3-1-7 defense that other teams tried to duplicate, but it didn't quite work out for other teams. But, I think if you look at the trajectory all around, I mean, if he were to get rid of, say, Cody Burns, I don't think that would be a bad thing. Cody Burns, a former quarterback at Auburn, turned wide receiver his senior year, hasn't seemed to be able to develop the wide receivers on a high level. Chad Morris, he's just now getting there as the offensive coordinator, so we really don't know what he would have been able to offer, considering that there was no spring, there was no fall practice for him to be able to develop the players as he wanted to. But, it's going to be a really weird transition for the Tigers. The good news is Auburn has a base of players that I think will really be able to sustain a successful season next year. I mean, it can't get too bad. I'm thinking maybe an 8-win season for the Tigers at worst, considering that they do play Penn State next year. They do play, of course, the Alabama, Georgia, and LSU teams that usually are more talented, and usually they are not favored to win those games. They have LSU on the road, they have Alabama on the road, and they have Alabama at home. They have Georgia at home, so there could be a possibility to where they can have some success there. So it's going to be very interesting to see who is retained. Now, if I'm going to be a dice roller here, if I'm going to be a riverboat gambler, I'm going to say that most of the defensive side of the football field probably will be retained. They've had some success. You talk about T. Will, you talk about Kevin Steele, Rodney Garner. Those guys have been able to recruit some real talent, and it showed, especially in the game against Mississippi State to a certain degree. I think there needs to be some coaching, obviously, on the defensive line side of the field, because they were outmanned against some of the more elite talent in the SEC. You talk about Alabama, Georgia, and Texas A&M, but those guys can only grow. So here is the biggest question. How does this work out? You talk about a lot of money that has to get kicked out if these guys are not retained. Some of these guys have just gotten extensions, so there has to be some type of buyout clause. So there probably is going to be some, back end conversation as to who needs to be retained and who doesn't. As always, it's great to be an Auburn Tiger, War Eagle. I appreciate all of you all tuning into the channel. Take care. Good night.